I'm Robin Fike at Stamping Country. Welcome to my studio. Today I'm going to show you how to make a unit study to do with preschool to elementary age children involving pumpkins and apples. The main tools we're going to use are the Harvest Hello stamp set and the Build an Apple Builder Punch. So I'm going to give you 12 things that you can do in this unit study. Let's start with art. I'm going to use the Harvest Hello stamp set and we're going to stamp. I have 15 grandkids, so I know they like to stamp. The only thing they like more than stamping may be punching. So we're going to use both of those things today to do this project. So we'll stamp our apple, and you want to teach them to tap on their pad and stamp. For some of the younger kids, you may need to do a little hand over hand. And then obviously we can color this. So you can color it with crayons, you can teach them how to use watercolor pencils, you can do whatever, but this is just simple stamping and coloring. The next thing that you can do also involves art, but it involves a lot of math and other things also, is you can make 3D apples or 3D pumpkins. So obviously you can also, for the younger kids, you can teach about colors. And for the older kids, I'm going to show you some other things that you can do. Now, I've found, you might find that it's easier to have your cardstocks pre-scored, so it's easier for the kids to fold. They can just fold the punched shape in half. You would just fold it right down the center, or you can have it pre-scored. I've cut a piece of cardstock that is 11 inches by 2¼ inches, which fits the punch very nicely. And so for older kids, they can measure and learn a little bit about fractions for this activity. So the score lines that we need are 1¼ 3 3/4 or 3 3/4, 6¼ or 6¼ and 8 3/4 or 8 3/4. This is just going to make it easier for them to fold. You don't have to do this part, you can just fold if you want to. But it gives you another opportunity to teach. The next thing we're going to do to make our 3D projects is to line up the center of the punch, the Apple Builder punch, with the score line. So you line it up and you punch. Now for younger kids, preschool and such, you may want to do about 10 shapes. And depending on their ability, you may need to have these pre-punched for them. Some of the older kids really enjoy the punching, so you want to let them do that. And then for the older kids, I would recommend 12 of each shape. And I'll explain why in a minute, because you can use that for a teaching opportunity as well. The next part you can teach is counting. So for the younger kids, you could count the shapes that you've punched out. You can either punch them for them, or they can punch them themselves. The next part is halves. So you can fold it, each one in half. And like I said earlier, you can use score lines, or you can simply fold it in half without the score lines. Either way will work. But these are just really easy for the kids. So you can tell them to fold them in half, so you're learning about halves and wholes. But we can take it a step further for the older kids and do more fractions, and I'll show you that here in a minute. So once you've folded them all, you could have the older kids divide them in half. Especially 12 is an easy number to work with. So they could divide their shapes in half, which is the fractions. What is 1/2 of 12? Well, it's 6. Or they could divide them into fourths. What is 1/4 of 12? Well, it's 3. Or what is 3/4 of 12? It's going to be 9. And you could use these shapes to divide it up. You could also do thirds. What is 1/3 of 12? And they visually can see that. What is 2/3 of 12? So that's a good way to do fractions. Now let's finish up by actually making our pumpkins and our apples. After you've done your math, you can go back to your art and science. So you'll begin gluing all these halves together. And what kid doesn't like to glue? Every kid I know likes to glue. So we're going to stack every one of those together. This is where fewer is probably better for the younger children. And I find a dozen works well for the older kids. You'll also want to punch the stem and the leaf. Use some green cardstock, and we'll punch that with the apple builder punch. You can punch them, the same punch will do both the apple and the pumpkin. And we'll want to insert that before we do the final round of gluing. Did you know that pumpkins and apples, the stem goes a different direction? For instance, on the pumpkin, the wider end is toward the bottom. Just picture it in your mind. And on the apple, the wider end is towards the top, and the narrower end is toward the bottom, or towards the fruit. So you can teach this while they are finishing assembling their apples and pumpkins. Pumpkins are wider at the bottom and apples are narrower at the bottom. So you just want to glue it finely together, and you're going to stick in your leaf and your stem. Super easy. You'll want to separate anything that has stuck together. Some of them will, especially with kids gluing. You'll want to help them with that. So that's our 3D option. Let's go to the next lessons. So you can color, you can do the 3D, or you could go somewhere in the middle. You could stamp and color a little bit and do 3D for the rest of it. You'll need about half as many punched apples, so maybe 5 or 6 to get this good 3D look on paper. So that's another option. Let's go to some other learning activities. Do you know whether a pumpkin is a fruit or a vegetable? Well, you could teach them about that, but let them stamp and color. Both pumpkins and apples have seeds, so they're fruit. You can also use your stamped images or your 3D items to practice letters. Or you could do spelling or reading, apple and pumpkin. You could also do a writing assignment, write about what you've learned. Pumpkins are fruit because they have seeds. You'll of course want to read related books or maybe go on a field trip. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you would like more details on and the 12 things that you can do in this unit study, be sure to look at the description below.